What if I told you hundreds of black people were murdered, tortured, and burned alive, and their stories were erased from history? Welcome to the Red Summer of 1919, a blood-soaked season of terror that targeted black communities across the United States. And the truth is darker than you can imagine. During the summer of 1919, the United States was on fire, not just with anger, but with blood of black people. What they don't tell you in history books is that the violence wasn't just a few isolated incidents. It was coordinated, planned, and meant to instill fear. These weren't race riots. This was a massacre. It all started in Chicago with a 17-year-old black teenager named Eugene Williams. He accidentally crossed an unofficial racist line at the beach. A white man threw rocks at him, causing him to drown. But justice wasn't even a thought. Instead of a proper investigation, a white mob went on a rampage. They descended upon black neighborhoods, dragging men and women from their homes, setting buildings on fire, torturing families, and murdering black people on sight. The brutality of the attack was indescribable. Homes were reduced to ash, people were beaten to death, and over 38 black lives were lost in just a week. The city was in chaos, but Chicago wasn't the only place where this kind of violence spread like wildfire. In Elaine, Arkansas, the bloodshed was even worse. White landowners were terrified of black people organizing for better wages and working conditions. They didn't just kill, they massacred. Entire communities were wiped off the map, burned to the ground. Black families were dragged into the streets, tortured, and executed. Some reports say as many as 237 black men, women, and children were slaughtered. The bodies of mothers and fathers were left to rot in the streets, with no one to bury them. And the worst part? No justice. The white militias responsible were never held accountable. This wasn't just random violence. This was strategic and terrifying. It was meant to remind black people of their place, to break their spirit, to crush any hope of freedom and equality. But there's a horrifying secret that's still buried in the ashes. The survivors. Many of the victims' families never saw justice. Some survivors were left homeless, wandering the streets with nowhere to turn. Some were silenced, their stories erased, their trauma ignored. But why? Why isn't this taught in our history books? Why is the Red Summer written off as a series of isolated riots when it was something much more sinister? Here's the truth. They don't want us to know. They don't want us to remember the sheer brutality of this. But we will. We can't let their stories be lost forever. And the fight didn't end in 1919. It continues today. The blood of those who died in the Red Summer runs deep in the fight for justice. But here's the real question. What happened to the families who survived? And what secrets did they carry with them?